The crystal champagne flute shattered in my hand, sending shards across the marble floor of my brother's new mansion. Blood trickled down my palm, but I barely noticed. My eyes were fixed on Jessica's face as she announced her pregnancy to our stunned family gathering. I'm Maya, and I know when someone is lying. 15 years of raising 3 boys has given me a sixth sense about deception. The way Jessica's fingers twitched against her designer dress, how her smile never quite reached her eyes. Everything screamed false. Congratulations! Mark, my husband, stepped forward to hug Alex while shooting me a warning glance. He knew my tells too. The slight tilt of my head, the way I pressed my lips together, signs I was about to say something I shouldn't. This calls for more champagne, Alex declared, beaming with pride. My brother, the successful tech entrepreneur, finally getting everything he wanted. A baby to complete his perfect life. Tyler, my middle son, appeared at my side with a napkin. Mom, you're bleeding. His quiet voice anchored me back to reality. I wrapped the cloth around my palm, watching the red bloom through the white fabric. When are you due? I asked Jessica, keeping my voice light. She hesitated for a fraction too long. March, she said, one hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. Wrong move. I'd been pregnant 3 times. No woman that early touches her stomach that way unless she's acting. Ryan, my eldest, was watching the exchange with narrowed eyes. At 18, he had inherited my bullshit detector. Lucas, my youngest, had already retreated to a corner with his phone, typical 14-year-old behavior. We should toast, Mark announced, trying to diffuse the tension crackling through the room. To Alex and Jessica's growing family. Everyone raised their glasses except me. I was too busy watching Jessica's face as she pretended to sip her champagne. The glass never touched her lips. Actually, Alex cleared his throat. We have another announcement. He glanced at Jessica, who gave him an encouraging nod. We've been thinking about adoption, too. Having a bigger family, maybe? The room went silent. I felt Mark's hand squeeze my shoulder. We thought, Jessica continued, her voice honey-sweet, that since you have 3 wonderful boys, Maya... She let the sentence hang there, heavy with implication. The cut on my palm throbbed. What exactly are you suggesting? Nothing concrete, Alex jumped in. Just floating the idea. Ryan's heading to college soon and we have so much space here. Stop. The word came out sharper than I intended. Just stop right there. Maya, Mark warned softly. But I was already moving toward Jessica, who took an involuntary step back. First a miracle pregnancy, now you want one of my sons? What's your game? I don't know what you mean, Jessica's voice wavered. We just want to share our blessings. Bullshit. The word echoed through the massive living room. You've barely spoken 10 words to my boys in the 2 years you've been with Alex. Now suddenly you want to play mom? That's enough. Alex stepped between us, his face flushed. You're out of line, Maya. Am I? I looked at my brother, really looked at him. The dark circles under his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands. What's really going on here, Alex? Before he could answer, Jessica suddenly pressed a hand to her mouth and rushed from the room, the perfect excuse to end the conversation. I should check on her, Alex muttered, following his wife. Mark came up behind me, wrapping an arm around my waist. Well, that was quite a party. I watched my 3 sons huddled together, whispering. Ryan's protective stance, Tyler's concerned frown, Lucas's defiant glare. My boys. My family. Something's not right, I said quietly, and I'm going to find out what it is. Just don't do anything rash, Mark replied, but we both knew it was too late for that warning. The game was already in motion, and I intended to win. 3 days after the disastrous pregnancy announcement, I stood in Alex's empty kitchen, staring at the prescription bottle I'd found hidden behind the coffee maker. The label had been partially scratched off, but I could make out enough to know these weren't vitamins. Looking for something? Jessica's voice made me jump. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching me with those calculating eyes. I held up the bottle. Fertility medications, interesting place to keep them. You shouldn't snoop through other people's things. Her voice was steady, but her fingers dug into her arms. And you shouldn't lie about being pregnant to my brother. The silence stretched between us like a rubber band about to snap. From the living room, I could hear Mark and Alex laughing about something, the the sound jarring against our tension. "You don't understand," Jessica finally said. "Alex needs this." "Needs what? A fake pregnancy? Or one of my children?" She moved closer, lowering her voice. "He's sick, Maya. Really sick. The doctors gave him 6 months, maybe less." The bottle nearly slipped from my hand. "You're lying." "Am I? Why do you think he's so desperate for an heir? For family?" Her perfect mask cracked slightly. "He won't tell you because he can't stand the idea of you pitying him. If this is another manipulation, Ryan already knows." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "Your perfect eldest son has been spending time with us, helping Alex get his affairs in order. He understands what's at stake." My phone buzzed, a text from Ryan. "Coming over to Uncle Alex's. Need to talk to you." "You stay away from my son," I hissed, but Jessica just smiled. "He came to us, Maya, because he sees the bigger picture, the legacy Alex could leave him, the opportunities." The front door opened and Ryan's voice carried through the house. "Mom? In here," I called, not taking my eyes off Jessica. Ryan entered the kitchen, freezing when he saw us. At 18, he looked so much like Alex at that age, the same determined jaw, the same ambitious glint in his eyes. "I see you two are talking," he said carefully. "Your aunt was just explaining how you've been helping Uncle Alex." The words tasted bitter. Behind my back. "Mom, don't." I held up my hand. "Just tell me if it's true, about Alex being sick." Ryan's silence was answer enough. Jessica slipped past us, pausing at the door. "I'll give you two a moment." Once she was gone, Ryan slumped against the counter. "I wanted to tell you, but Uncle Alex made me promise." "How long have you known?" 2 months. He collapsed during one of our lunch meetings. I drove him to the hospital." The bottle in my hand suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "And the adoption idea? Was that yours or hers?" "His. He wants to make sure his company stays in the family." "Jessica, she just wants what's best for him." I laughed, harsh and hollow. "Best for him or best for her?" "Why do you hate her so much?" "Because she's lying about something. I can feel it." I set the bottle down carefully. "And now she's using you to manipulate this situation." "Nobody's using me." Ryan straightened, looking more like his uncle than ever. "I'm making my own choices." "Are you? Or are you just seeing dollar signs and opportunities?" The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I'd gone too far. Ryan's face hardened. "You don't get to judge me, not when you've spent years telling us to look out for family. Well, Uncle Alex's family too." He stormed out, leaving me alone with the damning evidence of Jessica's deception and the weight of too many secrets. Mark appeared in the doorway. "Everything okay?" Ryan just left looking pretty upset. I picked up the fertility medication bottle and handed it to him. "We need to talk about Alex, Jessica, and what they're really planning for our family." His eyes widened as he read the label, then looked at me. "What do you want to do?" "First, I'm going to find out exactly what kind of game Jessica's playing. Then," I took the bottle back, clutching it tight, "I'm going to make sure she loses." The private investigator's file landed on my kitchen table with a dull thud. "Jessica Mitchell doesn't exist," he said, "at least not before 2019. I flipped through the documents, each page revealing another lie. What was her name before? Sarah Winters, then Rachel Cooper, then Elizabeth James. He tapped different photos, showing the same face under different names. She's got a pattern. Wealthy men, short marriages, generous divorces. My coffee went cold as I absorbed the implications. 3 previous marriages, each ending with substantial settlements. Each husband mysteriously ill during the divorce proceedings. My phone buzzed. "Tyler. Mom, something's wrong with Uncle Alex. At hospital, come quick." The drive to the hospital was a blur of red lights and racing thoughts. I found Tyler in the waiting room, his usual calm demeanor cracked. "He collapsed during lunch with Ryan," he said. "They won't tell us anything because we're not immediate family. Jessica's in there with him." "Where's your brother?" "Ryan's. With her." The way he said it made my skin crawl. I spotted them down the hall, Jessica and Ryan heads bent together in conversation. The sight of my son standing so close to her, nodding at whatever poison she was whispering, made my hands shake. "Mrs. Wilson?" A doctor approached, chart in hand. "Your brother's asking for you." Alex looked small in the hospital bed, tubes snaking from his arms. "Hey, sis." He managed a weak smile. "Sorry for the drama." "Cut the bullshit," I said, closing the door. "I know about Jessica's other husbands." His face didn't register surprise, just resignation. "How long have you known?" "Long enough. The question is, how long have you known?" He closed his eyes. "Since before the wedding. I hired someone to investigate her past after I found some inconsistencies in her story." "And you married her anyway?" "Because I loved her. Love her." He coughed, harsh and wet, and because by then the cancer was already stage 4. The truth hit like a physical blow. You're not just sick, you're dying. 6 months was optimistic. It's spreading faster than they thought. His hand trembled as he reached for water. "Jessica knows everything. About her past, about my prognosis. We made a deal." "A deal." "She stays, plays the grieving widow, gets her settlement. In exchange, she helps secure Ryan's future in the company." My blood ran cold. "You're using my son as a pawn?" "I'm securing his future, my legacy." Alex's voice strengthened with conviction. "Ryan has the drive, the intelligence, with Jessica's guidance." "Her manipulation, you mean?" I leaned closer. "She's done this before, Alex. 3 times. And each husband died under suspicious circumstances during divorce proceedings." He waved off my concern. "Those were different. She loves me." "Like she loved the others? Did you even check how they died?" A nurse knocked, entering with medication. I stepped back, watching Jessica slip in behind her, Ryan hovering in the doorway. "Everything okay in here?" Jessica's voice dripped concern, but her eyes were sharp. "Just fine," I replied, matching her tone. "Alex was telling me about your arrangement." Something flickered across her perfect mask. Fear? Anger? She recovered quickly, moving to Alex's side. "Darling, you should rest." "Mom," Ryan started, but I cut him off. "Not now." I headed for the door, pausing beside my son. "We'll talk about this at home." In the hallway, Tyler waited with Lucas, who had finally arrived. "Is Uncle Alex okay?" I looked at my younger sons, untouched by Jessica's influence, and made a decision. "No, he's not, and neither is your brother." "What do you mean?" Lucas asked. Through the window, I watched Jessica adjust Alex's pillows, playing the devoted wife while Ryan looked on admiringly. The perfect picture of family devotion, except I'd seen the autopsy reports of her previous husbands. All 3 had died from seemingly natural causes, their symptoms matching Alex's current condition perfectly. "It means," I said, pulling my sons close, "that we're going to save your uncle and your brother, whether they want to be saved or not." "How?" Tyler asked. I thought of the private investigator's file, of Jessica's pattern, of my son being drawn into her web. "By destroying Jessica before she can destroy our family." The boys exchanged worried looks, but I was already planning my next move. Sometimes, to protect the ones you love, you have to embrace the darkness they're too naive to see. The toxicology report sat unopened on my laptop screen for 20 minutes before I found the courage to click. 3 previous husbands, 3 similar patterns of declining health. Trace amounts of thallium found during the final autopsy of husband number 2, dismissed as environmental exposure. My phone lit up with a text from Ryan. "Meeting Jessica for lunch to discuss Uncle Alex's treatment options. Don't try to stop me." I closed the laptop and grabbed my keys, but Mark blocked the doorway. "Before you go charging in there, we need to talk. She's poisoning my brother, Mark, and our son is walking right into her web." "I know." He held up a manila envelope. The private investigator found something else, about Ryan. Inside were photos. Ryan and Jessica at various restaurants, coffee shops, his hand on her arm, her fingers brushing his shoulder. The timestamps went back months, long before Alex's diagnosis. "It gets worse," Mark said quietly. "Check the bank statements. $10,000 transferred from Jessica's personal account to a new account in Ryan's name. The date matched Alex's first hospital admission. My hands shook as I dialed Ryan's number. Straight to voicemail. "He's not at lunch with Jessica," Tyler said from the stairs, making me jump. "He's at the hospital with Uncle Alex. I just got off the phone with Lucas. He's there too." "Why didn't they tell me?" Tyler's face darkened. Because Jessica convinced them you're trying to sabotage Uncle Alex's recovery. She showed them emails supposedly from you to his board of directors, trying to have him declared mentally unfit. Those are fake. I know, Mom. That's why I hacked her laptop. Mark and I stared at our middle son, who shrugged. What? Someone had to do something while you were playing detective. He pulled out his phone, showing us screenshots. She's been planning this for over a year. The adoption idea? That was Ryan's suggestion, not Uncle Alex's. He and Jessica, they've been having an affair, I finished, the words tasting like ash. Not exactly. Tyler scrolled through more messages. She promised to make him CEO after Uncle Alex dies. Said she could convince the board if Ryan played along with her plan. Mark cursed under his breath. She's manipulating both brothers. 3, Tyler corrected. Lucas is involved too. She's been helping him apply to private schools behind your back, promising to pay his tuition if he supports her story about your mental state. The room spun slightly. I gripped the counter, trying to process the layers of betrayal. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Your brother's condition is deteriorating. Shame about the mix-up with his medication. But then, accidents happen when family members interfere with treatment plans. Mom, Tyler's voice seemed far away. What are we going to do? I looked at the photos again. My eldest son, my dying brother, my youngest being pulled into Jessica's elaborate scheme, each of them thinking they were getting what they wanted, none seeing the poison she was feeding them all. We're going to give her exactly what she wants, I said finally. Mark's eyebrows shot up. You can't be serious. Tyler, can you get into her banking records? He nodded slowly. Already have. She's got offshore accounts under her previous names. Good, because we're going to help her kill my brother. What? Both Mark and Tyler exclaimed. I picked up the toxicology report. She's careful, patient. Each death looked natural because she took her time. But if Alex dies too quickly, with too much poison in his system, the police will investigate, Tyler finished, understanding dawning on his face. And when they do, they'll find the evidence of her previous murders, along with proof that she's been manipulating my children. I turned to Mark. Unless you have a better idea? He studied my face for a long moment. You're talking about letting your brother die to catch her. I'm talking about sacrificing one life to save 3. My voice cracked. Because if we don't stop her now, Ryan will spend years under her control. Lucas will be trapped in her web, and who knows how many other families she'll destroy. Tyler's phone chimed. Ryan's texting. Uncle Alex is asking for you, says it's urgent. I grabbed my keys again, this time with purpose. Time to give Jessica her final performance. You two know what to do. As I drove to the hospital, I tried not to think about how revenge had twisted me into someone who could plot her own brother's death. But sometimes, fighting monsters means becoming one yourself. The family dinner felt like sitting on a powder keg. Alex barely touched his food, while Jessica kept refilling his wine glass with practiced care. Ryan sat at her right hand, playing the devoted nephew, while Lucas sulked at the far end of the table. Only Tyler watched everything with the same calculating gaze I'd come to rely on. The doctors are very optimistic, Jessica announced, her hand resting possessively on Alex's shoulder. The new treatment protocol is showing promise. Which doctors? The words slipped out before I could stop them. The ones who prescribed the medication I found in your drawer? The crystal wine glass in Jessica's hand trembled slightly. I don't know what you're implying. Mom, Ryan warned, but I was done playing nice. 3 previous husbands, Jessica, all dead within 2 years of marriage, all with similar symptoms to Alex's current condition. The silence that followed was deafening. Alex's fork clattered against his plate. That's ridiculous, Jessica laughed, but her eyes were sharp as razors. Ryan, tell your mother she's being paranoid. Ryan cleared his throat. Mom's been under a lot of stress lately. Maybe we should show them the transfer records. I cut in. The ones proving she's been paying you to support her story. The color drained from Ryan's face. Lucas sat up straighter, suddenly interested. What transfer records? Alex's voice was barely a whisper. Jessica stood abruptly, wine sloshing over the rim of her glass. I won't sit here and listen to these accusations. Alex needs rest, not this toxic environment. Sit down. Tyler's command surprised everyone. He pulled out his phone, sliding it across the table to Alex. Everything's there: the offshore accounts, the previous marriages, the suspicious deaths, and the messages between Ryan and Jessica planning how to manipulate you. Ryan lunged for the phone, but Mark caught his arm. "Don't," my husband said quietly. "It's time for truth." Alex scrolled through the evidence, his hands shaking. "Ryan, is this true?" "Uncle Alex, I can explain. He was trying to protect your legacy," Jessica interrupted smoothly. "Unlike some people who only want to tear this family apart." "By sleeping with my nephew?" The words hung in the air like poison. Jessica's mask cracked. We never." "The hotel receipts suggest otherwise," Tyler said, his voice cold. Lucas stood up so suddenly his chair toppled backward. "You promised me a future. You said if I helped you, you'd make sure I got into Westbrook Academy." "Lucas, quiet," Ryan snapped, but the damage was done. "All this time," Alex whispered, "while I was planning our future, planning to give you everything, I did it for us." Jessica reached for him, but he recoiled. "Everything I did was to secure our position, our legacy. By poisoning me, like the others?" She froze. "What others?" "The toxicology reports," I said quietly. "From husband number 2. Thallium poisoning is pretty distinctive." Jessica's composure shattered. She grabbed her wine glass and hurled it at me, but Tyler was faster, pulling me aside. The glass shattered against the wall, leaving a blood-red stain. "You've ruined everything," she screamed, advancing toward me. "I had it all planned perfectly." "Mom, stop her," Lucas yelled, but Ryan was already moving, putting himself between Jessica and me. "Don't," he said, his voice breaking. "It's over." The look she gave him could have frozen hell. "You ungrateful little—" Alex's coughing fit interrupted her tirade. He doubled over, gasping for breath, blood speckling his napkin. "Call an ambulance," Mark shouted, rushing to Alex's side. Jessica used the chaos to bolt for the door, but I was ready. As she passed, I grabbed her arm, spinning her around. "You're not going anywhere." Her laugh was hollow. "You think you've won. Look at your family, Maya. Look what your precious truth has done. Ryan's future is ruined. Lucas's dreams are shattered. And Alex?" She glanced at my brother's convulsing form. "Well, the damage is already done. I made sure of that this morning." She twisted free and ran, leaving me torn between pursuing her and helping Alex. The sound of sirens grew closer as I watched my family fracture before my eyes. Ryan knelt beside his uncle, tears streaming down his face. Lucas huddled in a corner while Tyler called the police. Mark caught my eye across the chaos, and I saw my own horror reflected there. We'd exposed the truth, but at what cost? And somewhere out there, Jessica was escaping with all our secrets, all our weaknesses, and nothing left to lose. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. The hospital corridor stretched endlessly before me as I followed the trail of blood drops, tiny crimson breadcrumbs leading to my brother's room. Alex had collapsed again during his attempted escape, proving Jessica's morning dosage had been particularly lethal. "He's asking for you," the nurse said, but her expression suggested I shouldn't expect much time. Inside, machines beeped in irregular rhythm. Tyler sat in the corner, laptop open, frantically tracking Jessica's financial movements. Mark stood guard at the door while Ryan paced like a caged animal. "Where's Lucas?" I asked. "Gone," Ryan spat, following Jessica's breadcrumbs about some private school connection. "He won't answer his phone." Alex's hand trembled as he reached for me. "The safe," he whispered, "behind the Kandinsky in my study. Everything you need." His monitors screamed. Medical staff flooded the room, pushing us out. Through the chaos, I caught Ryan slipping something into his pocket, a piece of paper from Alex's bedside table. "What did you take?" He met my gaze with Jessica's same cold calculation. "Insurance." "Against what?" "Against you destroying everything Uncle Alex built." He backed away. "You think you're protecting this family? You're tearing it apart." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. The text contained only an address and 4 words. "Lucas says hello, sister dear." Tyler looked up from his laptop. "Mom, Jessica just emptied all of Alex's accounts. Every penny gone." The doctor emerged, his face grave. "We've stabilized him, but the toxicology report shows massive organ failure. Whatever he was given..." We'll kill him, I finished. That's the point. My phone buzzed again. A photo this time. Lucas sitting in what looked like a private school office. Jessica's manicured hand visible on his shoulder. She's at Westbrook Academy, Tyler said, already pulling up the location. But Mom, there's something else. The school's financial director, he was married to Jessica's first victim. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. She's not running. This was her plan all along. Get Alex's money, take Lucas, destroy what's left of our family. Ryan. Mark's shout made us turn. Our eldest son was sprinting down the corridor, Alex's paper clutched in his hand. Let him go, I said, watching him disappear. He's made his choice. What now? Tyler asked. Now? I pulled out my car keys. Now we finish this. Mark, stay with Alex. Tyler, I need everything you can find on Westbrook Academy and Jessica's connection to it, and call the police. Tell them where to find her. Mom, Tyler's voice cracked slightly. What if we're too late? What if Lucas? Don't. The word came out sharper than intended. Your brother's not the only one she's trying to destroy. This is about legacy, about family. She's taken my brother, corrupted Ryan, and now she's using Lucas to complete her revenge. Revenge for what? For being the family she could never have. The realization hit me as I said it. Every husband, every manipulation. She's been trying to create the perfect family, then destroying it when it proves imperfect. My phone buzzed one final time. A video. Lucas staring into the camera, tears streaming down his face. Mom, I'm sorry. She says if you don't bring Alex's new will to Westbrook within the hour, she'll make sure Ryan takes the fall for everything. The affairs, the poison, all of it. She has proof. The screen went black. Tyler's fingers flew across his keyboard. Mom, the police are on their way, but they won't make it in time. I checked my watch. How long can you keep Alex stable? Mark's face darkened. You can't be serious. Jessica wants to destroy our family? Fine, let's give her what she wants. I pulled out my own copy of Alex's will, the one she didn't know about. But this time, we play by my rules. Maya. Mark grabbed my arm. This isn't about revenge anymore. This is about survival. No, I said, shaking him off. This is about justice. For Alex, for her other husbands, for our sons. I headed for the door. Sometimes the only way to protect your family is to be willing to lose them. Behind me, the monitors tracking Alex's heartbeat grew fainter, like a countdown to what was coming. I had less than an hour to save one son, stop another from destroying himself, and prevent a murderer from completing her masterpiece of destruction. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, Jessica waited, thinking she'd finally won. She had no idea what a mother protecting her children was capable of. It was time to show her. Westbrook Academy's empty hallways echoed with my footsteps as I approached the headmaster's office. Through the frosted glass, I could make out 3 silhouettes: Jessica, Lucas, and Ryan. Of course, Ryan would be here. He'd chosen his side. Right on time, Jessica called out as I entered. She sat behind the headmaster's desk like she belonged there, Lucas rigid beside her, Ryan leaning against the window with Alex's papers clutched in his hand. Where's the real headmaster? I asked, though I already knew. Indisposed. Food poisoning, such a shame. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. The will? I placed a manila envelope on the desk. First, let Lucas go. Mom, Lucas's voice cracked. I'm sorry, I thought... Quiet, Jessica snapped. Ryan, verify the documents. As Ryan reached for the envelope, I noticed something odd about his stance. The slight tremor in his hands, the way he wouldn't meet my eyes. He was scared. It's fake, he said after scanning the papers. This isn't Uncle Alex's signature. Jessica's facade cracked slightly. Where's the real will? With the police. Tyler's voice came from my phone in my pocket on speaker. Along with the evidence from your previous husband's deaths. They're on their way. You're bluffing. But Jessica's hand slipped into her desk drawer. The headmaster didn't have food poisoning, did he? I took a step forward. He recognized you from your first husband's case. That's why you needed him gone. Mom, Ryan warned, but I kept going. 3 husbands, 3 schools, 3 destroyed families. Always targeting men with sons, always playing the perfect stepmother, until they discovered the truth. Jessica pulled out a syringe, grabbing Lucas. Stay back. That's thallium in there, isn't it? Same thing you gave Alex this morning. Ryan's been helping you administer it for weeks, hasn't he? Lucas struggled, but Jessica held firm. Ryan moved toward them, his face unreadable. You don't understand. Jessica's voice shook. I gave them everything. Every husband, every family. I tried to be perfect, to create something lasting, but they always chose their blood relatives over me. Always. So you killed them? I set them free, and I gave their sons better opportunities, better futures. By manipulating them, by destroying their families, by saving them from mothers like you. She pressed the syringe against Lucas's neck. So protective, so righteous. But you're suffocating them. Ryan understands. Don't you, Ryan? But Ryan wasn't looking at Jessica anymore. He was looking at his phone, at the text I knew Tyler had just sent him. Proof that Jessica had already transferred Alex's money to an account in her name alone, leaving Ryan with nothing. You promised, he whispered. You said we'd build something together, that I'd inherit. Oh, grow up, Jessica spat. You were just like the others, so desperate for approval, so easy to mold. The syringe trembled against Lucas's skin. One push, and my youngest would suffer the same slow death as Alex. Mom, Lucas whimpered, and in that moment I saw my opening. Jessica, I said softly, there's something you should know about the will. She hesitated. What? Alex changed it last week, left everything to you, no conditions, it's in his safe at home. You're lying. Check your phone. Tyler just sent you the proof. As she reached for her phone with her free hand, Ryan moved. In one fluid motion, he grabbed the syringe and pulled Lucas away. Jessica lunged forward, but I was ready. The punch connected with her jaw, sending her sprawling across the desk. That's for my brother, I said as she struggled to rise. And this, I grabbed her hair, slamming her head against the wood, is for my sons. Sirens wailed in the distance. Ryan held Lucas as he sobbed, the syringe safely out of reach. Mom, Ryan's voice broke. I didn't know. I thought... I know. I kept Jessica pinned as footsteps thundered down the hallway. We'll talk about it later. As the police burst in, Jessica started laughing. You think this is over? Your precious family is already destroyed. Look at them. The trust broken, the bonds shattered. I've already won. I leaned close as they handcuffed her. No, Jessica. You just taught my sons what real family looks like. It's not perfect. It's not even always good. But we protect our own, even from themselves. The police led her away, her laughter echoing through the halls like a dying curse. My sons stood together, broken but alive, and I realized that sometimes victory looks a lot like survival. The key felt heavy in my hand as I unlocked Alex's front door. His house still smelled like him, coffee and expensive cologne, but the silence was deafening. The doctors had given him days, maybe hours. Jessica's final dose had done its work. Ryan stood in the doorway of the study, watching me gather Alex's papers. The police want my statement tomorrow. Tell them the truth. I pulled open the safe behind the Kandinsky. All of it. Even about helping her poison him? My hands stilled on the documents. Especially that. Lucas appeared in the doorway, his face tight. They found more victims. 7 husbands, not 3. Different names, different cities. 8, Tyler corrected, joining us with his laptop. Just found another one from 2015. She was getting better at hiding them. The safe's contents spread across Alex's desk like a roadmap of destruction. Bank statements, property deeds, and a letter addressed to me in my brother's shaking handwriting. I knew, I read aloud, about Jessica, about Ryan, about everything. But I thought I could protect them both. Forgive me, little sister. Some legacies aren't worth preserving. Ryan made a choked sound and left the room. Lucas followed, but Tyler lingered. The money's gone, he said quietly. She transferred everything before we caught her. Even with the evidence, it'll take years to recover. I closed the safe. We don't need it. But Uncle Alex wanted family. Real family. Not whatever twisted version Jessica sold him. The front door opened, and Mark's footsteps echoed through the house. Maya? The hospital called. I nodded, unable to speak. We all knew what that meant. There's something else, Mark continued. They found this in Jessica's cell. He held out a crumpled note. The handwriting was elegant, controlled. You think you've won, sister dear? Look closer at your precious family. Ryan wasn't the only one I taught my tricks to. Some poisons take years to surface. Some betrayals never heal. Sweet dreams. Lucas appeared behind me, reading over my shoulder. His face went pale. She's lying, he whispered. I wouldn't. But I saw the guilt in his eyes, remembered the strange illnesses that plagued his brothers over the past year. Small doses, experimental ones. Jessica's teaching methods were thorough. Mom? Tyler's voice cracked. I burned the note in Alex's fancy fireplace, watching Jessica's final attempt at destruction turn to ash. We start over, I said. All of us. No more secrets, no more poison, metaphorical or otherwise. How? Ryan had returned, hovering in the doorway like a ghost. After everything I did, we rebuild, one truth at a time. I turned to Lucas, starting with what Jessica taught you. He broke down then, confessing everything, the small doses, the experiments, the way she made it seem like a game. Tyler held his younger brother while he sobbed, his own tears falling silently. Mark touched my shoulder. Alex is asking for all of us. The drive to the hospital was silent. In the ICU, Alex barely had strength to smile, but his eyes were clear. Did you find it? He whispered. In the safe? I showed him Jessica's note. She tried one last time. Always. Had to have the last word. His laugh turned into a cough. Ryan? Our eldest son stepped forward, tears streaming. I'm sorry, Uncle Alex. You thought you could save everyone. Just like your mother. Alex's hand found mine. The real legacy isn't in the safe. It's in them, even the broken parts. His monitors began to slow. Promise me, he managed. No more revenge, only healing. I looked at my sons, Ryan's guilt, Tyler's quiet strength, Lucas's desperate need for redemption. The poisons in our family ran deeper than Jessica's chemicals, but maybe that's what made us stronger. We knew our darkness, could face it together. I promise, I whispered, but Alex was already gone. Later, standing in his empty study, I found one last note in the safe, written years ago. Family is the hardest poison to swallow, and the only antidote that matters. I left it there, locked away with the rest of our secrets. Some legacies are meant to be buried, while others, the ones written in blood and tears and forgiveness, those are the ones worth preserving, even if they leave scars, especially if they leave scars.
A music box. I stared at the small wooden object sitting on the attorney's desk. My grandfather left his entire fortune to my cousin, but all I get is a broken music box. Attorney Philip Hargrove adjusted his glasses nervously. Ms. Winters, I understand your disappointment, but according to Dr. Elliot Winters' final will and testament, this is indeed your inheritance. Across from me, my cousin Victor couldn't hide his smug smile. Don't look so shocked, Melody. You abandoned the family business years ago. What did you expect? My name is Melody Winters, 29 years old, and until 5 minutes ago, I believed my relationship with my grandfather, the brilliant Dr. Elliot Winters, founder of Winters Pharmaceuticals, had been special despite my decision to pursue music instead of medicine or business. The small wooden box mocked that belief. There must be some mistake, I said, picking up the box. It was beautiful craftsmanship, antique walnut with intricate carvings, but the mechanism was clearly broken. When I tried to wind it, nothing happened. Grandfather and I were close. He wouldn't just. The will is quite clear, Hargrove interrupted, sliding a document toward me. To my granddaughter Melody, I leave my music box, which she will find more valuable than she initially realizes. To my grandson Victor, I leave controlling interest in Winters Pharmaceuticals and all remaining assets. Victor stood, buttoning his designer suit. Well, if that's all settled, I have a company to run. The board is expecting me. He gave me a condescending pat on the shoulder. I'll have accounting send you a small stipend, Melody, family obligation, and all that. I jerked away from his touch. Don't do me any favors, Victor. After he left, I remained sitting across from Hargrove, staring at the music box. Was there anything else? I asked quietly. Any message? A letter. Hargrove hesitated, then reached into his desk. There was this. Your grandfather asked that I give it to you privately. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name and grandfather's distinctive handwriting. I tore it open, my hands trembling slightly. My dearest Melody, if you're reading this, then the inevitable has happened. And Victor has likely already begun calculating how quickly he can dismantle everything I've built. Don't be deceived by appearances. What seems worthless may contain the greatest value. You, of all people, understand that music is more than just pleasant sounds. It's mathematics, precision, patterns. The music box contains a puzzle only you can solve. Remember our conversations about Backed? About hidden messages in plain sight? Trust no one at Winters until you understand what the box truly contains. Victor will stop at nothing once he realizes what I've done. All my love. Grandfather. I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in my pocket. Hargrove watched me expectantly. Is everything all right, Ms. Winters? Yes, I lied, rising from my chair. Thank you for your time. Outside the law office, I hurried to my car, the music box clutched tightly against my chest. Batch. Hidden messages. What was grandfather trying to tell me? Our conversations about Backed had always centered around mathematical patterns and how the composer had hidden complex numerical sequences in his music. Grandfather had been fascinated by such things. Codes, puzzles, patterns within patterns. I drove directly to my small apartment, mind racing. I'd chosen a different path from what the family expected, pursuing a doctorate in music theory instead of joining Winters Pharmaceuticals. That decision had strained my relationship with my parents, but never with grandfather. He had supported me, funded my education, attended every recital. Now this music box was my only inheritance. There had to be more to it. At home, I cleared my desk and placed the box under my brightest lamp, examining it carefully. The craftsmanship was exquisite, hand-carved scenes depicting what appeared to be Greek mythology. I recognized Apollo with his lyre, but the other figures were unfamiliar to me. I tried again to wind it, but the mechanism remained stuck. Taking a deep breath, I gently pried off the bottom panel. Inside was a complex arrangement of gears and pins, the standard components of a music box, but arranged in a pattern I'd never seen before. Some of the pins seemed to be missing or deliberately removed. Tucked into a corner was a small paper scroll, yellowed with age. My hands trembled as I carefully extracted and unrolled it. Instead of the punched holes I expected, there was a musical score, handwritten notes for what appeared to be a short composition. At the top, in faded ink, Winter lied. Winter Psalm. A piece I'd never heard of. My phone rang, startling me. Victor's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Enjoying your inheritance? His voice dripped with condescension. Listen, Melody, I've been thinking. That music box might have sentimental value to the company. For the museum we're planning. I'll give you $50,000 for it. My heart raced. $50,000 for a broken music box? Victor was many things, but sentimental wasn't one of them. It was grandfather's gift to me. I replied carefully. I think I'll keep it. A pause. 100,000. Not interested. Don't be stubborn, Melody. You're a music teacher at a community college. You could use the money. Goodbye, Victor. I hung up. My suspicions growing stronger by the second. The music box contained something valuable, something Victor already knew about. I photographed the musical score and transferred it to my computer, then used my music notation software to recreate it. The piece was strange, just 16 bars, with an unusual time signature and key changes that made little musical sense. Following my instincts, I went to my electronic keyboard and played the piece. It sounded discordant, almost random. Not at all like something grandfather would appreciate. This wasn't about the music itself, it was about the pattern. I stayed up all night, analyzing the score from every angle. The note values, the intervals, the structure. Nothing made sense until I remembered grandfather's fascination with Bach's number symbolism. What if each note represented something else? A number? A letter? Around dawn, it hit me. The musical notes corresponded to numbers in a substitution cipher. A became 1B became 2 and so on. When I translated the melody line, it yielded a sequence of numbers. 38 to 45, 12 to 9, 16 to 7, 30 to 44. But what did these numbers mean? I was interrupted by a knock at my door. Through the peephole, I saw Dr. Helena Crane, grandfather's longtime research partner. She looked nervous, glancing repeatedly over her shoulder. Helena? I opened the door, surprised. What are you doing here? May I come in? She asked quietly. I shouldn't be seen here. Once inside, she spoke in hushed tones. Your grandfather warned me this might happen. Victor called an emergency board meeting this morning. He's shutting down your grandfather's special research division and selling the patents to Leon Pharmaceuticals. What special research division? Helena looked surprised. He didn't tell you? For the past 5 years, your grandfather led a small team developing a treatment for Korsakov's syndrome. We've had remarkable success, but Victor claims the research is economically unfeasible. Korsakov's syndrome, a rare neurological disease affecting fewer than 10,000 people worldwide, including my grandmother, who had died from it when I was a child. Grandfather had spoken of it rarely, but I knew her death had devastated him. Why would Victor shut it down if it's working? I asked. Because the treatment would be affordable, Helena explained. Your grandfather designed it specifically to be inexpensive to produce and distribute. Leon wants to buy the research so they can bury it. They have a different treatment in development, one they plan to charge hundreds of thousands per dose for. I thought of Victor's sudden interest in my music box. Helena, do you know anything about a Winterlied? She paled visibly. Where did you hear that name? I showed her the scroll from the music box, explaining grandfather's letter. Helena's hands trembled as she examined it. Winterlied was your grandfather's code name for the formula, she whispered. He was paranoid about corporate espionage in his final months. The complete formula and research data are hidden somewhere. He said he'd leave it where only the right person could find it. She looked at me with dawning realization. He meant you. But why me? I know nothing about pharmaceuticals. Because he trusted you, she said simply, and because Victor would never suspect. After Helena left, I returned to the numerical sequence with renewed determination. If these numbers were a key to finding grandfather's hidden research, what did they unlock? I tried coordinates, dates, various ciphers. Nothing worked. Frustrated, I picked up the music box again, studying the carvings more carefully. The figures I'd initially mistaken for Greek mythology were actually more specific. Each represented famous composers: Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, and there, nestled among them, was a tiny carving that didn't belong. A modern laboratory microscope. The incongruity struck me immediately. This wasn't an antique music box at all. It had been custom-made. I counted the composer figures. 8, the same number as my sequence. With trembling fingers, I pressed each figure in the order indicated by the numerical sequence. On the 8th press, I heard a faint click, and a hidden compartment in the base of the box slid open. Inside was a small USB drive and a handwritten note. The full symphony awaits. My phone rang again. Victor. Final offer, Melody. 500,000 for the music box. Right now. Something in his voice had changed, an edge of desperation. How did you know? I asked quietly. Know what? False innocence. That there's something hidden in the music box. That it's worth more than your initial offers. A pause. I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm simply feeling generous toward my cousin. The board meeting this morning, shutting down grandfather's research on Korsakov's syndrome. That wasn't a coincidence, was it? Another longer pause. You've been talking to Helena. His voice hardened. Be careful, Melody. You're dealing with things you don't understand. The music box. Name your price. It's not for sale. I hung up. Within minutes, my phone was flooded with text messages, first from Victor, then from unknown numbers. Threats, bribes, warnings. I turned off my phone and inserted the USB drive into my laptop. It contained hundreds of files, research data, clinical trial results, and most importantly, the complete formula for what grandfather had codenamed Winterlied. But there was something else. Financial records showing that Victor had been secretly negotiating with Leon Pharmaceuticals for months, planning to bury the Korsakov's treatment in exchange for a personal payout of $50 million. My grandfather had known. He discovered Victor's betrayal and created this elaborate puzzle to ensure his life's work wouldn't be destroyed by corporate greed. A crash from outside my door made me jump. Someone was trying to break in. I grabbed my laptop, the USB drive, and the music box and fled through the fire escape just as my door splintered open. I drove straight to Helena's house, calling her from a gas station payphone on the way. She was waiting for me when I arrived, along with another member of grandfather's research team, Dr. Abernethy. We need to release this publicly, I told them, showing them the files. All of it, the formula, the research data, and Victor's deal with Leon. If we do that, Winter's Pharmaceuticals could collapse, Helena warned. Thousands of jobs lost. Not if we move quickly, Dr. Abernethy countered. The board doesn't know about Victor's side deal. If they see this evidence before he can complete the Leon transaction. A plan formed rapidly. Helena still had allies on the board. Dr. Abernethy had contacts in the scientific press. And I had something neither of them possessed, legal standing as a Winter's heir, even if my inheritance had seemed meager. That night we worked tirelessly, preparing a comprehensive package of information. By morning, it was in the hands of 3 board members, the FDA, and select science journalists known for their integrity. The response was swift and decisive. The board called an emergency session and suspended Victor pending investigation. Leon Pharmaceuticals publicly denied any improper negotiations. And most importantly, grandfather's research was saved. 2 weeks later, I sat in what had been Victor's office, now temporarily mine as the board determined the company's future. The music box sat on the desk, now fully restored and playing a beautiful melody, the real Winterlied, not the coded version. Grandfather had composed it for my grandmother during her illness. Helena entered with a stack of documents. The board's decision is unanimous. They want you to take over as chairperson. I laughed in surprise. Me? I don't know the first thing about running a pharmaceutical company. You know the most important thing, she countered. The purpose of medicine isn't profit, it's healing. Your grandfather always said you were the only one who truly understood that. I picked up the music box, listening to its delicate melody. My grandfather had built a pharmaceutical empire, but his true legacy wasn't measured in dollars or market share. It was measured in lives improved and suffering eased. The Korsakov's treatment, I said finally. How soon can we bring it to market? 6 months, maybe less with proper funding. Make it a priority, and I want it affordable, just like grandfather intended. Victor will fight back, Helena warned. He still owns shares in the company. I smiled, thinking of the additional files I hadn't yet revealed. Evidence of other ethical breaches that would keep Victor too busy with legal defense to challenge my position. Let him try. The music box continued its gentle melody, a reminder that sometimes the most valuable inheritances aren't the ones that come with impressive titles or massive bank accounts. Sometimes they're hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone who knows how to truly listen. 3 months later, I stood on a stage at the announcement of the Elliott Winters Foundation, a new nonprofit dedicated to developing affordable treatments for rare diseases. The board had unanimously approved using a significant portion of company profits to fund it. On a table beside me sat the music box, now the symbol of our new corporate mission. As I addressed the crowd of scientists, patients, and press, I could almost feel grandfather standing beside me, his hand on my shoulder. The true measure of value, I told them, isn't what something costs, but what it's worth. And that's a distinction that makes all the difference. In my pocket was a small note I'd found hidden in a different compartment of the music box, one that had only revealed itself after the mechanism was fully repaired. Its message was simple but profound. Music and medicine share the same heart. Both exist to bring harmony where there is discord. Never forget that, my melody. I hadn't inherited a fortune in the traditional sense. I'd inherited something far more valuable. A purpose. And unlike Victor, I understood the true worth of what had been placed in my hands. Sometimes the smallest gift contains the greatest treasure. You just need to know how to unlock it. You have 2 weeks to clear out your office, my brother said, dropping the termination papers on my desk with a satisfied smirk. The board has unanimously voted to remove you as chief archivist. Grandfather's will was quite clear. Leadership of the Montgomery Historical Foundation belongs to me now. I stared at him, struggling to process his words. This can't be right, Nathan. Grandfather promised me. Promises mean nothing without legal documentation, Eleanor, he interrupted, adjusting his perfectly tailored suit. Perhaps if you'd spent less time buried in your precious artifacts and more time understanding how the real world works, you wouldn't be so shocked. My name is Eleanor Montgomery, 36 years old, and until 5 minutes ago, the chief archivist of the Montgomery Historical Foundation, a prestigious institution dedicated to preserving our city's history, established by my grandfather, Edward Montgomery, over 60 years ago. The foundation housed irreplaceable historical documents, photographs, and artifacts that told the story of Westbrook, from its founding in 1782 to the present day. For 15 years, I had dedicated my life to expanding and preserving our collections, earning a doctoral degree in archival science and turning down prestigious positions at major museums to continue my grandfather's legacy. Nathan, my older brother by 3 years, had shown little interest in the foundation until recently, right around the time he discovered its substantial endowment and valuable real estate holdings. The official transition ceremony will be next Friday, Nathan continued, glancing around my office with calculating eyes. The mayor and several major donors will be attending. I trust you'll make yourself scarce. Grandfather would never have left the foundation to you, I said, finding my voice at last. He knew you have no interest in historical preservation. You've never spent a single day working here. Nathan's smile didn't reach his eyes. That shows how little you knew him. In his final months, he realized the foundation needed stronger leadership, business leadership. All your careful cataloging and community programs are charming, but they don't secure the financial future of this institution. By financial future, you mean selling off parts of the collection and converting the West Wing into luxury condos. I asked, recalling the architectural plans I'd accidentally discovered on his tablet during our last family dinner. A flicker of surprise crossed his face before he composed himself. The foundation needs to evolve, Eleanor. Some assets are more valuable when liquidated than preserved. Grandfather understood that in the end. I thought of my grandfather, his passion for history, his meticulous approach to preservation, and his absolute commitment to keeping the Montgomery collection intact and accessible to the public. The man Nathan described was unrecognizable to me. When did he change the will? I asked quietly. 2 months before he died, Nathan replied, straightening a paperweight on my desk. After his stroke, when he was thinking clearly about the future. Now, I suggest you start packing. And Eleanor, he added, his voice hardening, don't get any ideas about removing anything from the archives. Everything here belongs to the foundation, to me, now. After he left, I sat motionless, staring at the termination papers. 2 months before his death, grandfather had been in the hospital, barely able to sign his name, let alone make complex legal decisions. Something didn't add up. My office phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. Eleanor? It's Mabel. I just saw Nathan leaving. Did he? Yes. I cut in, relieved to hear from grandfather's longtime assistant and my most trusted colleague. He's taking over. Says grandfather changed his will after the stroke. There was a long pause. That's impossible, Mabel finally said, her voice unusually sharp. Edward made me promise not to tell anyone, but after the stroke, he was worried Nathan might try something like this. He had me witness a new will, one that explicitly named you as his successor and included specific provisions to prevent the collection from being sold off. My heart raced. Where is this will? Why wasn't it presented at the reading? That's the problem, Mabel sighed. Edward gave it to his attorney, Samuel Hayes. But Sam died in that car accident 3 weeks after Edward passed. His practice was taken over by his nephew, who claims he never found the document. I've been trying to track it down, but she trailed off. Nathan got to the nephew. I finished her thought. Paid him off to lose the will. I can't prove it, Mabel said carefully, but I witnessed that will, Eleanor. It exists, or it existed. And there's something else. Your grandfather left you a message, something about looking where the past and present meet, and that the Montgomery secret isn't in the regular archives. I assumed he was delirious from medication, but now I wonder. After hanging up, I sat back, my mind racing. Where the past and present meet, and not in the regular archives. It sounded like one of the riddles grandfather used to create for me when I was young, teaching me about hidden histories and the importance of looking beyond the obvious. I glanced at my watch. It was nearly 6 p.m., and most of the staff would be leaving. If I was going to search for whatever grandfather might have hidden, tonight would be my best opportunity. As darkness fell and the foundation emptied, I began my search, starting in grandfather's old office, now Nathan's. which connected to my smaller workspace. Nothing seemed out of place or unusual. I checked behind paintings, under floorboards, inside hollow books, all the hiding places grandfather had shown me over the years, but found nothing. Hours passed as I methodically worked my way through the building, focusing on areas that had special meaning to grandfather. The rare document room, the photographic archive, the map collection. Nothing. Exhausted and discouraged, I found myself in the foundation's central atrium around midnight. This grand space featured a magnificent grandfather clock that had been keeping time since the building opened in 1960. It stood at the exact spot where, according to local history, the city's founding documents had been signed in 1782. Where the past and present meet, I whispered, looking up at the clock. The clock's steady ticking was the only sound in the empty building as I approached it. Grandfather had been obsessed with this timepiece, insisting on winding it himself every Sunday without fail. After his stroke, he'd made me promise to continue the tradition. I opened the clock's case, expecting to find only the pendulum and weights. Instead, there was a small brass key taped to the inside of the door, with a note in grandfather's shaky hand. For my true hair, the foundation's foundation. My hands trembled as I removed the key. The foundation's foundation, another riddle. What was the foundation of the foundation? The answer came to me in a flash. The cornerstone. When the building was constructed, grandfather had insisted on placing a time capsule in the cornerstone, to be opened on the foundation's 100th anniversary. That was still 40 years away, but perhaps. The cornerstone was located in the building's basement, behind a decorative panel in what was now used as a storage room. Few people even knew it existed anymore. I made my way down the darkened stairs, using my phone's flashlight to guide me. The storage room was cluttered with old exhibition materials, broken display cases, and outdated office furniture. It took me nearly 30 minutes to clear a path to the far wall where the cornerstone was located. The decorative panel came away easily, revealing the massive stone block with MMTF 1960 carved into its face. Next to the cornerstone was a small, almost invisible keyhole. The brass key fit perfectly. With a soft click, a hidden drawer slid out from beneath the cornerstone. A drawer that, according to the building's plans, shouldn't exist. Inside was a leather portfolio and a sealed envelope with my name on it. My hands shook as I opened the envelope first. My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, then my fears about Nathan have proven correct. I've always known that his interest in our family's legacy extended only to its monetary value. But in my final months, he has become increasingly bold in his inquiries about the foundation's assets and endowment. What Nathan doesn't know, what no one outside the direct Montgomery line has ever known, is that the true value of our family's legacy isn't in the buildings or the official collections, but in what I've gathered in this portfolio. When your great-great-grandfather established himself in Westbrook, he did so by acquiring historical documents that powerful families wanted kept private. Not to blackmail, but to preserve the complete truth of our city's history, both glorious and shameful. For 5 generations, we Montgomerys have been the secret keepers of Westbrook, collecting and protecting the uncomfortable truths that others would prefer to erase. The portfolio contains my true will, witnessed and notarized, leaving you in control of the foundation with specific provisions to prevent the collection from being sold. But it also contains something far more valuable. Documentation of the secret history of Westbrook's 5 founding families, including the Caldwells. Nathan's father-in-law, Judge Richard Caldwell, would be particularly disturbed to learn that these papers exist, especially as he campaigns for the state Supreme Court. The Caldwell family fortune was built on land seized through forged deeds in the 1850s, land taken from the very people they claimed to be helping. I've never used these archives as leverage that would betray the historian's sacred trust. But I've always made sure the relevant families know that a complete and accurate history exists, safely preserved by our family. Use this knowledge wisely, Eleanor, not to threaten, but to protect our mission. The truth is a powerful tool when wielded with integrity. All my love, Grandfather. I opened the portfolio with trembling hands. Inside, I found Grandfather's true will, exactly as Mabel had described, along with a collection of documents, photographs, and letters dating back to the 1800s. Most shocking were the papers related to the Caldwell family, land deeds with clearly forged signatures, private letters admitting to the fraud, and photographs documenting the family's intimate connection to city officials who helped cover up their misdeeds. No wonder Nathan had been so determined to gain control of the foundation. His father-in-law, Judge Caldwell, must have put him up to it, hoping to finally locate and destroy these documents before they could derail his Supreme Court ambitions. But what should I do with this information? Grandfather had never used it for leverage or personal gain. He had simply preserved it, honoring his commitment to maintaining a complete historical record. I carefully replaced everything in the portfolio. Dawn was breaking as I made my way back upstairs, the key and portfolio hidden safely in my bag. I had 1 week before the official transition ceremony, 1 week to decide how to proceed. The Montgomery Historical Foundation was unusually busy that Friday evening. Local dignitaries, board members, and major donors filled the atrium, sipping champagne and waiting for the ceremony to begin. Nathan stood in the center of it all, receiving congratulations and sharing his visionary plans for the foundation's future. I waited in my office, my former office, watching through the window as Judge Caldwell arrived, clapping Nathan on the shoulder with paternal pride. They'd been thick as thieves since Nathan married the judge's daughter 5 years ago. Now I understood why. A soft knock at my door announced Mabel's arrival. "Everything's ready," she said, her eyes bright with anticipation. "The mayor just arrived. They're about to begin." I nodded, gathering my courage and the leather portfolio. "Let's not keep them waiting then." The atrium fell silent as I walked to the podium, Nathan's expression shifting from surprise to annoyance. "Eleanor," he hissed as I passed him, "what do you think you're doing? We agreed you wouldn't be here." I smiled politely. "I wouldn't miss this for the world, Nathan. It's a historic occasion." Before he could stop me, I reached the podium and addressed the crowd. "Thank you all for coming to this important transition in the Montgomery Historical Foundation's history. For over 60 years, this institution has been dedicated to preserving the complete and accurate history of Westbrook, both the stories we celebrate and those we might prefer to forget." Nathan was moving toward me now, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. Judge Caldwell watched with growing concern. "My grandfather believed that history belongs to everyone, not just those with the power to write it. He dedicated his life to ensuring that our city's full story would be preserved for future generations." I removed grandfather's will from the portfolio and held it up, which is why I'm pleased to share that I've located my grandfather's true final will, properly witnessed and notarized, in which he explicitly names me as his successor and includes specific provisions preventing the foundation's collection from being sold or dismantled. Gasps and murmurs spread through the crowd. Nathan froze mid-step. "Unfortunately," I continued, "this will was somehow misplaced after my grandfather's death, and a different document was presented instead, one that supposedly named my brother as successor, despite his complete lack of experience in historical preservation." Nathan reached the podium, gripping my arm. "That's enough," he growled. "You're embarrassing yourself." "Actually," came a new voice from the back of the room, "I think we should hear Ms. Montgomery out." The crowd parted to reveal District Attorney Maria Santos, whom I contacted earlier that week. Beside her stood Samuel Hayes' nephew, looking decidedly uncomfortable. "Mr. Hayes has provided my office with a very interesting statement regarding the handling of Edward Montgomery's will," the DA continued, moving forward. "It seems he was offered a substantial sum to misplace certain documents." Judge Caldwell had gone pale, while Nathan's grip on my arm tightened painfully. "You have no idea what you're doing," he whispered. "The Caldwells will destroy you." I smiled sadly at my brother. "No, Nathan, it won't. Because unlike you, I understand what the Montgomery legacy really means." I turned back to the assembled guests. "Today's ceremony will proceed as planned, but with an important correction. As per my grandfather's legitimate will, I will continue to serve as the Foundation's director, and my first act will be to announce a special new exhibition examining the complex history of Westbrook's founding families, including previously unseen documents from our private archives." I looked directly at Judge Caldwell as I said this. His expression told me he understood perfectly what documents I was referring to. "Of course," I added, "this exhibition will be presented in the spirit my grandfather always insisted upon, not to shame or accuse, but to acknowledge our complete history, so that we can move forward with honesty and integrity." The aftermath was both more dramatic and more subdued than I expected. Nathan resigned from the foundation's board the following Monday, citing personal reasons. Judge Caldwell quietly withdrew his candidacy for the state Supreme Court 2 weeks later. The exhibition went forward as planned, though I was careful to present the Caldwell documents in their proper historical context, without sensation or accusation. History, after all, is rarely about heroes and villains. It's about human beings making choices in complex circumstances. 6 months later, I sat in grandfather's old office, my office now, organizing materials for our newest acquisition, the complete archives of the city's first hospital, which had operated from 1820 to 1945. The foundation was thriving, with increased attendance, new community programs, and a reinvigorated mission. A knock at the door interrupted my work. To my surprise, it was Nathan, looking older and less polished than when I'd last seen him. "Eleanor," he said awkwardly, hovering in the doorway. "Do you have a minute?" I gestured to the chair across from my desk, studying my brother's face. He'd lost weight, and there was a humility in his bearing that I'd never seen before. "I owe you an apology," he said after a long silence. "Several, actually. You tried to steal my inheritance and destroy grandfather's legacy." I replied evenly. "So yes, I'd say an apology is in order." Nathan winced. "It wasn't just about the money, you know? Not at first. Richard, Judge Caldwell, convinced me that the foundation was wasting its potential under your leadership, that we could transform it into something more prestigious, more influential, more profitable," I added. "Yes," he admitted. "That too. But I never knew about the documents, not until Richard became desperate to find them. By then, I was in too deep." I considered my brother thoughtfully. Despite everything, he was still family, the only close family I had left. "What will you do now?" I asked. "I've taken a teaching position at the community college," he said with a small smile. "American history. Turns out I've developed a genuine interest in the subject, albeit too late." "It's never too late to develop an appreciation for history," I said, unconsciously echoing grandfather's words. "That's rather the point of preservation, making sure the past remains accessible to the present." Nathan nodded, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small object, our grandfather's pocket watch, which I believed lost after his death. "I took this," he admitted, placing it on the desk between us. "I shouldn't have. It belongs with the foundation, with you." I picked up the watch, feeling its familiar weight. Grandfather would be pleased to know it's found its way home. As Nathan left, I opened the watch, smiling at the inscription inside. "Time reveals all truths. E.M." Grandfather had been right, of course. The truth had eventually come to light, as it almost always does. My job, the Montgomery family's true legacy, was to make sure it remained visible to all who cared to look, not hidden away in cornerstone drawers or basement archives, but properly preserved, contextualized, and shared. I placed the watch in the display case beside my desk, next to the brass key that had led me to the hidden portfolio. Together, they serve as daily reminders that history isn't just about preserving the past. It's about protecting the truth for the future, regardless of who might prefer it remained forgotten. "We're selling the shop," my uncle declared, slapping a contract onto the workbench with enough force to make my toolbox rattle. "The developer's offer is too good to pass up." I set down the carburetor I'd been rebuilding and wiped my hands on a shop rack, trying to process his words. "You can't sell Mason Motors. Dad left it to me in his will. My name is Marcus Mason, 28 years old, and the only child of Thomas Mason, who built Mason Motors from nothing into one of the most respected classic car restoration shops on the East Coast. When Dad died unexpectedly of a stroke 3 months ago, I'd stepped in to keep things running, just as he prepared me to do my entire life." Uncle Richard's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Your father may have had sentimental ideas about leaving you the business, but legally, I'm the executor of his estate." He gestured around the garage. "Look at this place, Marcus. It's prime commercial real estate sitting on 2 acres just outside downtown. The property alone is worth millions." My Aunt Patricia emerged from Dad's office, carrying a box of his personal items. She'd been organizing things since the funeral, but it looked more like looting to me. "Marcus, be reasonable," she said, her voice honeyed with fake sympathy. "You're young. Take the money from the sale and do something else with your life. Your father trapped you in this grease pit since you were a child. This is your chance to break free." I looked around at what she called a grease pit. To me, it was a cathedral of craftsmanship. Every tool had its place, every workstation was meticulously organized. The 4 restoration bays each held vehicles in various stages of rebirth: a 1965 Mustang Fastback, a 1957 Thunderbird, a 1970 Chevelle SS, and my father's personal project, a 1963 Corvette split window that he'd been restoring for over a decade. "Dad didn't trap me here," I said firmly. "He taught me everything I know. This shop is my heritage." Uncle Richard checked his watch impatiently. "The developers are meeting us here tomorrow at noon. They're planning to break ground on a luxury condo complex by summer." He pushed the contract toward me. "Your signature isn't legally necessary, but it would make things smoother." I didn't touch the papers. "I want to see the will again." "It's all being handled properly," Aunt Patricia interjected quickly. "Richard has been consulting with our attorney to make sure everything is in order." "Their attorney, not Dad's." "Dad would never have wanted Mason Motors sold," I insisted. "This place was his life's work." "Thomas wasn't thinking clearly toward the end," Richard said, his voice softening in a way that immediately put me on edge. "The doctors said the early signs of his stroke were affecting his judgment for months before he collapsed." This was the first I'd heard of any such thing. Dad had been sharp as ever until the day he died, discussing restoration techniques and business strategies with me just hours before the stroke took him. "I don't believe you," I said flatly. Richard's expression hardened. "Believe what you want. The sale is happening. If you want any share of the proceeds, you'll stop making this difficult." After they left, I stood in the quiet shop, the familiar smells of motor oil, metal, and leather surrounding me like an embrace. On the wall hung photographs documenting over 30 years of restorations. Dad standing proudly next to finished projects, shaking hands with clients, teaching workshops, and in many of them, a smaller version of me, watching, learning, growing into the craftsman I'd become. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I should have called weeks ago. "Elena Vasquez," answered the crisp voice of my father's attorney. "Ms. Vasquez, it's Marcus Mason. I need to talk to you about my father's will." "Marcus," she sounded surprised. "I've been trying to reach you since the funeral. Your uncle told me you were too devastated to deal with legal matters." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. "I never got any messages from you." "That's concerning. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning? There are things we need to discuss about your father's estate." "My uncle says he's the executor, that he has the legal right to sell Mason Motors." There was a pause. "Who told you Richard was the executor?" "Richard did. And my Aunt Patricia." "Marcus," Elena's voice had taken on a steely quality, "your father never named Richard as his executor. He named me." The next morning, I sat across from Elena in her downtown office as she laid out the true contents of my father's will. "Thomas was very clear," she explained, spreading documents across her desk. "Mason Motors, the business, the property, the equipment, everything was to pass directly to you. Richard's only role was as a trustee for some investments your father made for his retirement." I stared at the will, my father's familiar signature at the bottom. "Then how is he selling the shop?" Elena's face tightened. "He isn't. At least he has no legal right to. But based on what you're telling me, it appears Richard and Patricia have been misrepresenting their authority." She checked her watch. "When did you say they're meeting with these developers?" "Noon today." She began gathering papers into her briefcase. "Then we don't have much time. Is there anything else unusual you've noticed since your father's death?" I thought about it. Tools have gone missing, specialized equipment, and there's a locked file cabinet in Dad's office that Patricia keeps telling me is just old tax records, but she won't let me see inside. Elena nodded grimly. "Classic case of estate theft. Unfortunately more common than you'd think, especially with valuable businesses." She handed me a key. "Your father left this with me. He said if anything ever happened to him, I should make sure you got it." The key was small and brass, unremarkable except for the small MM engraved on it. "What does it open?" He never specified, just said you'd know when the time came. By 11:30, we were back at Mason Motors. Elena had called the local police, who had sent Officer Jenkins, coincidentally a client whose '68 Camaro Dad had restored the previous year. He stood off to the side as Elena explained the situation to my aunt and uncle, who had arrived early for their meeting with the developers. "This is absurd," Richard sputtered, his face reddening. "I'm his brother. Of course I'm the executor." "Being a brother doesn't automatically grant you that authority," Elena replied calmly, sliding the will across the desk. "As you can see, Thomas named me as executor, with explicit instructions that the business pass to Marcus." Patricia's carefully composed facade was cracking. "There must be some mistake. Richard has been handling everything." "Yes, I'd like to discuss exactly what he's been handling," Elena cut in, "including the unauthorized removal of property from the estate and the apparent interception of my attempts to contact Marcus." Uncle Richard stood abruptly. "We don't have to listen to these accusations. The developers will be here any minute." "Actually," Officer Jenkins spoke up, "anyone conducting business here today would be participating in a fraudulent transaction. I'd suggest you call them and cancel." As Richard reluctantly made the call, I remembered the key in my pocket. Looking around Dad's office, my eyes fell on the locked file cabinet Patricia had been so protective of. The key slid in perfectly. Inside wasn't tax documents, but rather 3 decades of meticulous records. Every car Dad had ever restored, with before and after photos, parts lists, client information, and detailed notes on the techniques he used. It was the collected wisdom of his entire career, an irreplaceable archive. But in the back of the bottom drawer was something else. A leather-bound journal and a sealed envelope with my name on it. I opened the envelope first, my hands trembling slightly. "Marcus, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've likely had to fight for what's rightfully yours." I've always known Richard and Patricia coveted what I built, never understanding that the real value of Mason Motors isn't in the land or the building, but in the knowledge, craft, and reputation we've built together. I've kept this journal since the day I opened the shop, documenting not just restorations, but my journey as a craftsman and a father. It's yours now, along with everything I've built. Trust Elena, she knows exactly what I wanted for you. One last thing. In the journal, you'll find the combination to the safe behind the shop sign in my office. Inside is something I've been saving for when you were ready to truly make Mason Motors your own. I love you, son. Every car has a story. Make sure ours continues." "Dad," I looked up at the vintage neon Mason Motors sign mounted on the wall, the one Dad had salvaged from the original tiny garage where he'd started the business. I'd never known there was a safe behind it. As Elena continued dealing with my increasingly desperate aunt and uncle, I carefully took down the sign, revealing a small wall safe. Using the combination from the journal, I opened it. Inside was a deed. The original purchase agreement for the land where Mason Motors now stood. But it wasn't in my father's name. It was in both of ours. Thomas and Marcus Mason, joint owners with right of survivorship. Dad had put my name on the property when I turned 18, a decade ago. Beneath the deed was a business plan, dated just 2 months before his death, outlining an expansion of Mason Motors to include a restoration school. Paperclip to it was an approved small business loan and architectural drawings for converting our storage building into classrooms. "Marcus?" Elena called from the doorway. "Is everything all right?" I handed her the deed, watching as understanding dawned on her face. "Your father put the property in both your names," she said with a smile. "Even if Richard had somehow managed to manipulate the will, he could never have sold this land without your signature." We returned to the main office, where Richard and Patricia waited, their confident demeanor now completely evaporated. "The property was never solely in Dad's name," I said, placing the deed on the desk. "It's been in both our names for 10 years. You couldn't have sold it even if you were the executor." Richard's face went from red to white. "That's impossible." "Thomas would have told me." "Why would he?" I asked. "So you could try to talk him out of it, or pressure me to sell after he was gone. He knew exactly who you were." Patricia grabbed her purse, already edging toward the door. "Richard, we should go." "Before you do," Elena interjected, "we need to discuss the missing tools and equipment, and the classic car parts that have been disappearing from inventory." Officer Jenkins stepped forward. "We can discuss that at the station if you prefer." In the end, Richard and Patricia avoided criminal charges by agreeing to return everything they'd taken and signing legal documents acknowledging my ownership of Mason Motors and relinquishing any claims to my father's estate. 6 months later, I stood in the newly renovated classroom space, watching 20 students bent over engines, learning the restoration techniques my father had perfected. The Thomas Mason School of Automotive Restoration was officially open. preserving not just classic cars, but the craft itself. Dad's 1963 Corvette split window now occupied a place of honor in the showroom, finally completed using the detailed plans he'd left in his journal. Beside it hung his portrait and the original Mason Motors sign, a reminder of where we started and how far we'd come. That evening, after the students had gone, I sat in Dad's, now my office, leafing through his journal, his voice alive in every handwritten page. I paused at an entry from my 16th birthday. Gave Marcus his first solo restoration project today, the '57 Chevy pickup. His eyes lit up like it was Christmas morning. Richard says I'm wasting my time, that the boy should be focusing on computers or business school, something modern. He doesn't understand that what I'm teaching Marcus isn't just about cars. It's about patience, problem solving, respecting the work of those who came before us, and the satisfaction of bringing something back to life with your own two hands. Some legacies can't be measured in dollars and cents. I closed the journal, running my hand over its worn leather cover. Uncle Richard had been right about one thing. Mason Motors was indeed valuable, but not for the reasons he thought. The true worth wasn't in the land or the building, but in the legacy of craftsmanship, the relationships with clients who trusted us with their treasured vehicles, and the knowledge now being passed to a new generation. Every car has a story, Dad used to say. Some stories are about greed and betrayal, but the best ones, the ones worth telling, are about passion, perseverance, and honoring those who taught us everything that matters. Mason Motors would have its next chapter after all. The night my former boss's restaurant lost its third Michelin star, I was in the kitchen of my own restaurant, watching the live stream of the ceremony on my phone. When they announced that Lumiere had been downgraded, my sous chef Elena looked up from the delicate dessert she was plating and caught my eye. "Is that satisfaction or guilt I see on your face, chef?" she asked. I switched off my phone and tucked it into my pocket. Neither. Professional interest, that's all. She didn't believe me. No one who knew my history with Xavier Laurent would have believed me, but the truth was more complicated than simple revenge. 5 years earlier, I had been Xavier's second-in-command at Lumiere, the crown jewel of his culinary empire. I'd given him 8 years of my life, working 16-hour days, perfecting his recipes, maintaining his impossible standards, all while he took the credit. Xavier Laurent, celebrated chef, media darling, terror of the kitchen. The man who had both made and destroyed my career. The dish that ultimately came between us, Crescent Moon, he called it, was a deceptively simple plate. Seared scallops with a saffron emulsion, accented by a complex reduction I had developed over months of experimentation. Xavier had watched me create it, tasting each iteration, offering minor adjustments, but the soul of the dish was mine. When Food and Wine declared it the most innovative seafood presentation in a decade, and credited Xavier exclusively, I made the mistake of confronting him. "This is my dish," I said quietly as we stood in his office after service. "You know it's my dish." Xavier had looked at me with cold amusement. "Your dish? In my restaurant? Using ingredients I pay for? With techniques I taught you?" He shook his head. "There are no individual achievements in my kitchen, Madeleine. Everything here belongs to Lumiere, to me." I might have accepted that if he had at least acknowledged my contribution privately. Instead, he began taking credit for the inspiration, claiming in interviews that the dish came to him in a dream of the Mediterranean coast. 2 weeks later, I gave my notice. Xavier's response was swift and devastating. "Leave if you must," he said, his French accent thickening as it always did when he was angry. "But understand this, you will never work in a serious kitchen in this city again." I thought he was exaggerating his influence. He wasn't. Within a month, every promising job opportunity mysteriously evaporated. Executive chef position at the Harbinger. We decided to go in a different direction. So chef at Tableau? The position has been filled internally. Even a consulting job developing menus for a hotel chain was pulled at the last minute. Xavier had blacklisted me thoroughly. After 6 months of unemployment, I took the only job I could find. Line cook at an airport restaurant, churning out mediocre omelets and overdone steaks for travelers who couldn't tell the difference. At night, I experimented in my tiny apartment kitchen, refining techniques, developing recipes, and planning. The inheritance from my grandmother came unexpectedly, Not a fortune, but enough to consider opening a small place of my own. The only problem: Xavier's influence extended to investors and banks as well. No one would take a chance on the chef who had dared to leave the great Xavier Laurent. That's when June Kim entered my life. I was catering a gallery opening, a side gig I'd taken to make ends meet, when June approached me about a small puff pastry I filled with caramelized shallots and thyme. "This is remarkable," she said, taking another from the tray. "The balance of textures, the restraint with the filling. Who are you?" June turned out to be a successful tech entrepreneur with a passion for food and a particular dislike for culinary emperors with more ego than innovation, as she put it. When I told her my story, she didn't hesitate. "Let's open a restaurant," she said. "Your food, my money, no interference. I've been looking for an investment that matters." 3 months later, Find was born, a tiny 28-seat restaurant in a neighborhood just beginning to gentrify. No white tablecloths, no elaborate tasting menus, just thoughtfully prepared food with clean flavors and perfect execution. June insisted we keep my involvement quiet until we were established. "Xavier has a long reach," he warned. "Let the restaurant build its reputation before he realizes you're behind it." It was a wise precaution. We opened with little fanfare, but word spread quickly. A favorable write-up in a local blog led to attention from the city paper. Soon we were booked solid weeks in advance. I stayed in the kitchen, avoiding publicity, letting the food speak for itself. 8 months after opening, the New York Times restaurant critic visited anonymously. His review, titled "Revelation in Simplicity," called Thyme the most exciting new restaurant in the city and praised the invisible chef whose technical mastery is matched only by their restraint and clarity of vision. That review changed everything. Suddenly everyone wanted to know who was behind Thyme. Food magazines requested interviews. TV producers called. Through it all, I remained in the background, with June as the public face of the restaurant. "It's killing Xavier," June reported after attending an industry event. "Thyme is all anyone's talking about, and he can't figure out who's in the kitchen." A year after opening, we received our first Michelin star. 6 months later, unprecedented for a new restaurant, we received our second. The mystery around the unnamed chef only fueled interest. Speculation ran wild. Was it a famous chef working incognito? A culinary prodigy discovered by June Kim? All the while, Lumiere began to struggle. Xavier, distracted by his growing television career and new restaurants in Las Vegas and London, was spending less time in his flagship kitchen. Reviews noted inconsistency, dishes that felt dated rather than classic, service that had become perfunctory rather than perfect. I took no pleasure in his troubles. Despite everything, I respected what Xavier had built. He was a gifted chef who had lost his way, prioritizing empire over excellence. The night before the Michelin announcements, June came to me with a proposition. "It's time," she said. "Tomorrow, after the announcements, we reveal who you are." The chef who left Xavier was blacklisted and built something extraordinary from nothing. The narrative is perfect. I hesitated. And if Xavier retaliates? He can't touch us now. We're too successful, too beloved. Besides, she smiled, I have a feeling tomorrow's announcements may humble him significantly. She was right. The live stream I watched in my kitchen confirmed what industry rumors had suggested. Lumiere, after 15 years with 3 Michelin stars, had been downgraded to 2. And Thyme, against all expectations for such a young restaurant, had been awarded its 3rd star. That night, after service, I gathered our small staff. They knew who I was, of course, but had kept the secret faithfully. "Tomorrow," I told them, "my name goes public as the chef and owner of Thyme. There may be attention, controversy even, but nothing changes in this kitchen. We cook the same food with the same standards for the same reasons." Elena raised her glass of shift drink. "To Chef Madeline Harper, finally getting the recognition she deserves." The others cheered, but I felt strangely conflicted. Success was sweet, yes, but I had never wanted it at Xavier's expense. I had simply wanted recognition for my work, the freedom to cook my food my way. The next morning, June orchestrated the revelation perfectly, an exclusive interview with the same magazine that had praised Xavier's version of my dish years before. By noon, my phone was ringing constantly. By evening, the story had gone viral in culinary circles. Blacklisted chef behind 3-star Thyme revealed. I expected anger from Xavier, perhaps legal threats. What I didn't expect was to find him waiting outside the restaurant after service, sitting alone at the small table we kept on the sidewalk for guests to wait for their reservations. "May I speak with you, Madeline?" he asked, standing as I emerged. He looked older, more tired than the last time I'd seen him. I considered refusing, but curiosity won out. I nodded toward a nearby all-night diner. "Not here." In the harsh fluorescent light of the diner, Xavier looked out of place in his expensive suit. He ordered coffee, then sat silently for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "I was wrong," he finally said, words I never expected to hear from him. "About many things, but especially about you." I waited, unwilling to make this easier for him. "Your dish, crescent moon. I should have acknowledged your creation. I told myself it was how kitchens work, that I had done the same under other chefs when I was young. But it was different." He looked down at his coffee. "I was threatened by you, by your talent. So I tried to diminish you, then destroy you when that didn't work." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because Lumiere lost a star? Because Time gained one? Because I tasted your food," he said simply. "I came to Thyme 2 months ago, anonymously. I knew within 3 bites that it was you in a kitchen. No one else combines technical precision with such emotional clarity." He paused. "Your crab with brown butter and preserved lemon. It made me remember why I became a chef." I was speechless. The dish he mentioned was one I was particularly proud of, a study in simplicity that required perfect execution. "I lost my way, Madeline. Television, expansion, the constant pressure to remain relevant. I stopped cooking from my heart. That's why Lumiere lost its star, not because you succeeded, but because I failed." "What do you want from me, Xavier?" "Nothing. I came to acknowledge what I should have years ago. You are an exceptional chef. What you've built at Thyme, it's pure, honest, brilliant. I wanted to tell you that before the media circus begins." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table. "What's this?" I asked, not touching it. "A letter to the New York Restaurant Association, the James Beard Foundation, and several other organizations I influenced against you. Admitting what I did and taking full responsibility. You won't need it now, your success speaks for itself. But perhaps it offers some closure." I finally took the envelope, not sure whether to believe him. "Why now?" Xavier gave a sad smile. "Because cooking was always about truth for me before everything else. Your food at Time reminded me of that. I've spent 5 years living a lie about you, about your contributions. It's time for truth." He stood to leave, then paused. "The dish, crescent moon. I've removed it from Lumiere's menu. It was always yours, never mine." After he left, I sat in the diner for a long time, turning the envelope over in my hands. 5 years of anger and resentment didn't disappear in a single conversation, but something had shifted. The next morning, as predicted, journalists swarmed Thyme. The story was irresistible. The vindicated chef, the spectacular success built from adversity, the fall of the mentor who had tried to destroy her career. Everyone wanted the narrative of revenge. But when asked if satisfactory Thyme's success was made sweeter by Lumiere's downgrade, I found myself saying something unexpected. No restaurant loses a Michelin star easily, and no restaurant gains one without extraordinary effort. This isn't a zero-sum game. There's room for many expressions of culinary excellence. 2 weeks later, as the media frenzy was finally subsiding, a package arrived at Thyme. Inside was a first edition of Escoffier's Le Guide Culinaire, a culinary text both rare and revered. The inscription read simply, "To truth in cooking. Excel." That night, I created a new dish, seared sea scallops with a saffron emulsion and a complex reduction. Crescent moon, reclaimed. I placed it on Thyme's menu with a note, inspired by lessons learned. It became our most requested dish. 6 months later, Elena approached me after service, curiosity in her eyes. "The new chef at Lumiere is looking for a sous chef. Word is Xavier is stepping back to focus on his original restaurant, trying to earn back that 3rd star. But for him," I said, meaning it. "There's more," she hesitated. "He asked specifically if you might recommend someone from Thyme's kitchen. Said he wants to build a team that cooks with the kind of honesty he experienced here." I considered this as I wiped down my station. "What do you think? Interested in the position?" Elena looked surprised. You'd let me go to Xavier's restaurant? I'd support you pursuing any opportunity that helps you grow, I said. That's something I had to learn the hard way. True mentorship means celebrating when your people succeed, not controlling their journey. The following week, I did something I never imagined doing. I had dinner at Lumiere, sitting alone at a corner table. Xavier came out briefly, our eyes met, and he gave a small nod of acknowledgement before returning to his kitchen. The food was different, more focused, more personal than the last time I'd eaten there. I could taste his renewed commitment in every dish. When dessert arrived, it wasn't on the menu. A perfect miniature rendering of Time's signature chocolate tart with rosemary caramel. The note with it read, "The secret ingredient was always truth. Thank you for the reminder." As I left the restaurant, I realized the greatest revenge would have been to see Xavier fail. But the greater victory was this: two chefs cooking with honesty, two restaurants pushing each other toward excellence, and the knowledge that my success hadn't come at the cost of my integrity. June met me for a late drink after my dinner. "So, how was the enemy's camp?" I swirled the wine in my glass. "There are no enemies in this story, June, just chefs finding their way back to what matters." She studied me for a moment. "You know, when I invested in Thyme, I partly did it because I loved the revenge narrative, the underdog triumphant. And now? Now I think the best revenge wasn't showing Xavier up." She raised her glass. "It was showing him, and yourself, what's possible when you cook with complete freedom and truth." Truth. The word Xavier and I both kept circling back to. In an industry built on transformation and illusion, on turning simple ingredients into transcendent experiences, perhaps truth was the most elusive ingredient of all. The following year, when the Michelin stars were announced, both Thyme and Lumiere received 3 stars. The food media tried to reignite the rivalry narrative, but neither Xavier nor I played along. Instead, we did something that shocked the culinary world. A collaborative dinner, 6 hands with Alana, now his executive sous chef. Alternating courses that told the story of influence, separation, and reconciliation through food. The final course was a duo of desserts placed side by side. His interpretation of my signature chocolate tart, my interpretation of this famous oula flottant. Different expressions, equal respect. As the last guest departed, Xavier and I stood in Thyme's kitchen, the space where I had rebuilt my career from the ashes of his betrayal. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For being better than I was, for showing me it was possible to cook with both ambition and integrity." He gestured around the kitchen. "You've created something remarkable here, Madeline. Not just the food, but the culture, the truth." I thought about the journey from ambitious young chef to bitter outcast to vindicated success. None of it had gone as planned, yet somehow the result was more satisfying than any revenge could have been. "The secret ingredient," I said, echoing his note from months before, "was always truth." As Xavier left, I remained in my kitchen, running my hands over the smooth countertops, the well-used equipment, the space that had become my canvas for honest expression. The revenge narrative would have ended with Xavier's downfall and my triumph. But the truth was more complex, more nourishing. 2 chefs who had lost their way finding it again, through conflict and reconciliation. In the culinary world, as in life, the most powerful transformations happen not when we destroy our adversaries, but when we rediscover our authentic voice, that unique, irreplaceable perspective that no one can take from us, not even those who once tried to silence it. The next morning, I began developing a new dish, one that would appear on both our menus simultaneously. Full circle, we would call it. A celebration not of victory or defeat, but of the journey that brought us both back to the truth at the heart of our vocation. After all, in cooking as in life, the most important ingredient is the one you can't see on the plate, the integrity with which it was created. The day I discovered my grandfather's fortune wasn't lost but hidden was the same day his murderer tried to break into my apartment. I suppose I should have expected it. After all, $2 billion doesn't just disappear without someone noticing. My name is Natalie Chen, and until 3 weeks ago, I was just another overworked architect at a prestigious firm in Manhattan, designing luxury spaces I could never afford. Then my grandfather, the infamous Michael Chen, founder of Pinnacle Investments, died in what police called a robbery gone wrong at his modest Boston apartment. Modest, that was the word that kept appearing in the news reports. How the mighty Michael Chen, once worth billions before his company's spectacular collapse 5 years ago, had been living in a one-bedroom apartment, apparently penniless after investor lawsuits and government fines had stripped him of everything. The funeral was small, attended mainly by distant relatives, hoping against hope that the old man had squirreled away something for them. My Uncle Richard, who had been my grandfather's right-hand man at Pinnacle before the collapse, delivered a eulogy that sounded more like a business presentation, complete with thinly veiled references to lessons learned and the price of ambition. I sat in the back row, uncomfortable in the only black dress I owned, watching my relatives size each other up as potential rivals. None of them had spoken to my grandfather in years. None except me. Miss Chen. The lawyer approached me after the service, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his handshake firm but not aggressive. Martin Wells, I handled your grandfather's affairs. He left something for you. Richard materialized beside us, his eyes narrowing. Martin, I wasn't aware my father left anything for anyone. Just a few personal effects, Wells replied smoothly. Nothing of financial value. Richard's disappointment was palpable. Well, Natalie hardly needs keepsakes. She saw him every Sunday for the past 5 years while the rest of us were dealing with the fallout from his crimes. I met my uncle's gaze steadily. Those Sunday visits meant something to him. And to me. How touching, Richard sneered. Did he happen to mention during those touching visits where the missing investor funds went? $2 billion doesn't just vanish. He was found innocent of theft, I reminded him, though the words sounded hollow even to me. The courts have ruled that my grandfather hadn't stolen the money, but they never determined what had happened to it either. Pinnacle's collapse remained one of the greatest unsolved financial mysteries of the decade. Wells cleared his throat. If you'll come by my office tomorrow, Miss Chen, we can handle the paperwork. The personal effects turned out to be disappointingly mundane. My grandfather's collection of first edition mystery novels, his chess set, and an old worn peacoat that seemed at odds with the crisp suits I always remembered him wearing. He was very specific that these items go to you, Wells said, sliding the paperwork across his desk. I ran my fingers over the soft wool of the peacoat. This doesn't even look like something he would wear. Your grandfather changed considerably after Pinnacle's collapse, Wells offered. Perhaps his tastes simplified along with his circumstances. I nodded, though something felt off. Grandfather had been many things, but simple was never one of them. That night in my apartment, I examined the items more carefully. The books were beautiful but unremarkable. No hidden messages or secret codes jumped out from their pages. The chess set was the same one we played with during my Sunday visits, each piece familiar under my fingers. The coat was the puzzle. I held it up, studying the worn elbows and frayed cuffs. It looked like something a dock worker might wear, not the man who had once graced the cover of Forbes. As I ran my hands over it, I felt something strange in the lining, a stiffness that shouldn't be there. Using a pair of small scissors, I carefully cut along the inner seam. Inside the lining was a thin, leather-bound journal, its pages filled with my grandfather's distinctive handwriting. Property is merely a concept, the first page began, and concepts can be reimagined. I stayed up all night reading the journal, my hands trembling as I turned each page. It wasn't a confession or an apology. It was a roadmap. The $2 billion hadn't been stolen, it had been hidden, converted into physical and digital assets scattered across the globe using a complex system of transactions that left no paper trail. The journal detailed everything: locations, access codes, conversion protocols. But more chilling were the names. My grandfather had identified 6 key people he believed had orchestrated Pinnacle's downfall. He called them the architects, and my Uncle Richard was one of them. They thought they were destroying me, my grandfather wrote. They didn't realize they were setting a trap that would take years to spring. The final entry was dated just 3 days before his death. Everything is in place. Natalie will understand what to do. She always sees the patterns others miss. A sharp knock at my door made me jump. It was 3 a.m., too late for visitors. Through the peephole, I saw Richard standing in the hallway, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled, his eyes darting nervously. Natalie, open up. I need to talk to you about the will. I quickly hid the journal under my sofa cushions. It's the middle of the night, Richard. It's important. Your grandfather, there might be more to his estate than Wells let on. My hand froze on the doorknob. How would Richard know that unless? I can come back tomorrow, I called through the door, making a split-second decision not to let him in. This can't wait, he insisted, his voice taking on an edge I'd never heard before. Open the door, Natalie. Instead, I quietly gathered the journal, my phone, and my wallet, shoving them into a backpack along with some clothes. The fire escape outside my bedroom window wasn't ideal, but it beat facing whatever had brought my uncle to my door at this hour. As I climbed down the metal stairs, I heard the splintering of wood above me. Richard hadn't been alone, and they weren't waiting for an invitation. I spent that night in a 24-hour diner, nursing endless cups of coffee as I read and reread the journal, trying to understand what my grandfather expected me to do with this information. By morning, I had a plan, or at least the beginning of one. The journal's first set of coordinates led me to a small bank in Zurich where a safe deposit box contained exactly what my grandfather promised. Bearer bonds worth $50 million, a USB drive, and a set of keys. Your grandfather said you would come, the bank manager told me as he led me to the private viewing room. He was very specific about the timing. The timing? The manager checked his watch. Yes, he said if you arrived before today, I was to turn you away. If you never came, the contents would be donated to charity next month. But if you arrived precisely between days 18 and 25 after his death, I was to give you full access. 18 to 25 days, specific enough to be deliberate. But why that time frame? The USB drive provided the answer. It contained surveillance footage from my grandfather's apartment on the night of his murder. The timestamp showed 2:17 a.m. as a figure in dark clothing entered through the balcony door. My grandfather, surprisingly alert for that hour, didn't seem shocked by the intrusion. Right on schedule, I heard him say in the footage. Richard always was punctual, even for a murder. The camera captured everything, my uncle's face as he removed his mask, their conversation about the missing billions, and finally, the moment when Richard plunged a knife into my grandfather's chest. You'll never find it, my grandfather gasped as he fell. I don't need to, Richard replied coldly. Once you're dead, I can take my time searching. No one else knows it exists. But my grandfather had known this was coming. He had planned for it. The 18-day delay suddenly made sense. It was the exact amount of time the police would hold the crime scene before releasing the apartment back to the estate, which Richard controlled as executor. My grandfather had given me a head start, but not a large one. If I had understood the journal correctly, there were 5 more locations, 5 more pieces to recover before I could fully unravel what my grandfather had done with the missing billions, and more importantly, prove who had really been behind Pinnacle's collapse. The second location took me to Singapore, where a seemingly ordinary painting in a private gallery contained microscopic etchings that, when viewed under a special lens included with the safe deposit box contents, revealed account numbers and passwords to digital assets worth hundreds of millions. In Hong Kong, a storage unit rented under a false name contained hard drives with evidence implicating 3 more of the architects in a conspiracy to manipulate markets and destroy Pinnacle from within. With each discovery, I pieced together my grandfather's true narrative. He hadn't been the villain in Pinnacle's collapse, he had been the scapegoat. The 6 architects, his most trusted executives and partners, had orchestrated the company's downfall, siphoning off assets and manufacturing evidence that pointed to my grandfather. But instead of fighting back immediately, he had disappeared the remaining assets, bided his time, and meticulously documented everything. He had created an elaborate posthumous revenge, with me as its executor. By the time I reached the 4th location, a small law firm in London, Richard had figured out what was happening. My hotel room was ransacked while I was out. A man in a dark suit followed me through Piccadilly Circus. Anonymous threats arrived by text message. You're in over your head, Natalie, Richard himself finally called to tell me. Your grandfather was a manipulative old man who was using you as a pawn from beyond the grave. Whatever you think you're doing, stop now. Before you kill me too? I asked. A pause. I don't know what you think you know, but you're making dangerous accusations. I have the footage, Richard, from grandfather's apartment. He knew you were coming. Another, longer pause. Then you understand this isn't a game. $2 billion buys a lot of influence, Natalie. People far more powerful than you want this to stay buried. Is that why you killed him? For the money? I killed him because he was going to expose everything. The money is just an insurance policy. His voice hardened. Walk away now, and you can keep what you found so far. More than enough for a comfortable life. But I had seen my grandfather's full plan now, and it was breathtaking in its complexity and justice. The final 2 locations would complete the puzzle, revealing not just the remaining assets but putting into motion a sequence of information releases that would expose the architects to regulatory agencies worldwide. It was never about the money for him, I realized aloud. It was about the truth. Richard laughed bitterly. Michael always did know how to dress up greed as principle. Don't be naive. But as I followed the trail my grandfather had left, moving from London to Dubai to a remote island in the Caribbean, I came to understand that my grandfather's plan went beyond personal revenge. He had created a financial dead man's switch. If executed correctly, it would not only expose the conspiracy that destroyed Pinnacle but would return the missing funds to the investors who had lost everything. The final location was the most surprising of all, my grandfather's modest Boston apartment. According to his journal, he had hidden the master key to the entire system in plain sight, somewhere even Richard would never think to look. Returning to Boston was dangerous, but I had no choice. Richard would surely be watching the apartment, knowing it contained the final piece. I needed a distraction. Using the resources my grandfather had left me, I orchestrated simultaneous information leaks to financial authorities in 3 countries, each containing partial evidence against the architects. As expected, the resulting chaos, including the arrest of 2 of Richard's co-conspirators, drew his attention away from Boston long enough for me to slip into the apartment. The place had been thoroughly searched, furniture overturned, walls opened, floors pulled up. Whatever hiding place my grandfather had chosen had withstood Richard's desperate attempts to find it. I stood in the center of the destruction, trying to think like my grandfather. Where would you hide something so important that even someone who knew you well wouldn't find it? The answer came as I remembered our Sunday chess games. My grandfather had always said that the best hiding place was one disguised as something else, something so familiar that no one would think to question it. The chess set from his personal effects, the one I'd inherited. Back in my hotel room, I examined each piece carefully until I found it, the black king with a nearly imperceptible seam around its base. Twisting it revealed a small compartment containing a microchip and a handwritten note. Natalie, if you're reading this, you've solved the puzzle as I knew you would. The final key is encoded in the microchip, but it will only activate when synchronized with the other 5 components you've collected. Once activated, the system will transfer the remaining assets to the recovery fund for Pinnacle's investors and release the complete evidence package to authorities worldwide. Richard and the others will have nowhere to hide. I'm sorry for putting this burden on you, but you were the only one I could trust, the only one who saw me as a person, not a fortune. The world believed I stole billions, but the truth is I've spent 5 years ensuring those billions would find their way back to their rightful owners, while those truly responsible face justice. You have a choice now. Activate the system as I've designed it or walk away with what you've already found. I would understand either decision, but know that you were never a pawn. You were always my queen, the most powerful piece on the board. With love and faith, grandfather. That night, as I connected the microchip to the assembled system, I thought about choices and consequences. My grandfather had spent 5 years in exile, bearing the world's hatred, working toward this moment of posthumous vindication. Richard had killed to protect a fortune built on betrayal, and I had followed a trail of breadcrumbs that led to this moment of decision. The system activated with a simple command: justice, not vengeance. Within hours, financial news outlets worldwide were reporting the sensational return of the missing Pinnacle funds, accompanied by irrefutable evidence of the conspiracy that had destroyed the company. Richard and the remaining architects were arrested as they attempted to flee the country. 6 months later, I stood at my grandfather's grave, now marked with a simple headstone rather than the unmarked plot Richard had hastily arranged. You should have trusted me while you were alive, I told him, placing a chess piece, the Black King, on top of the stone. We could have done this together. The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and for a moment, I could almost hear his voice. You've always seen the patterns others miss. I smiled despite the tears forming. The inheritance my grandfather had left wasn't the money, all of which had gone back to the investors as he intended. It was something far more valuable. The truth, meticulously documented and preserved against all odds. As I walked away, my phone buzzed with a notification from Martin Wells. There was one final item in my grandfather's estate, a small property in the mountains that had somehow been overlooked in the initial accounting. Nothing valuable, Wells assured me. Just a cabin he purchased after Pinnacle's collapse. But legally, it's yours now. Something told me this wasn't an oversight, but the final move in my grandfather's grand design. What would I find there? Another puzzle? A simple place of retreat? Or perhaps just a note saying goodbye? Whatever awaited me in the mountains, I knew one thing for certain. My grandfather had reimagined the concept of inheritance. He hadn't left me wealth or status or power. Instead, he had left me the most valuable asset of all, the chance to rewrite history with the truth. And that was a responsibility I would never take lightly.